That Councillor Pelkman is joining us via Zoom. Welcome, Councillor. Motion to approve the agenda of this meeting. Councillor Canis, seconder, Councillor Derbyshire. All in favor? Carried. Are there any declaration of pecuniary interest? Okay. Seeing none, before I turn this over to the CAO and Director Dakin, just have a motion to receive the 3 items in front of us for information. Motion, Councillor Wilsey, second by Deputy Mayor. All in favor? Carried. I'm going to note it has been a long day. Some of us have been here since 10 in the morning, so put us on a bit of a clock. I don't think there's any need for this to go more than an hour and a half. So at this point, I'll turn it over to CAO McKibben.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to begin, before you is our new format for our budget process. This is a format that is, the intent of this is to make the content sort of approachable, readable, and accessible to anyone that picks up the document. It has a lot of information on the front end of how a budget is built and how a budget is used. And the purpose of the meeting tonight is to start to walk through sort of that front end of the budget. And then moving forward on Thursday, we will start to get into the numbers of the budget, and we have a schedule which Director Dakin will speak to as to what departments we're going to be focusing on at each meeting. So we're going to break it down by departments so that we can go through each department at a meeting. There'll be several departments, depending on the size, at a meeting that will be discussed. As you can see, this is a very sort of infographic sort of budget document. I would like to thank staff for the content that went into the budget, not only the numbers, but that front end information. And also a special thank you to Director Dakin and Jesse Vandergaard, our communication assistant, who created and designed this document. So as I said, the purpose of tonight is sort of to do that front end, the sort of the first, as I look here at the pages, sort of the first half of the document to walk through that and how we got to the numbers that we have. And then starting on Thursday night, then we'll step into the numbers and sort of get into the sort of the meat and potatoes of things. So I'd like to turn it over to Director Dakin to walk us through the budget and provide some information to Council.
Great, thank you very much. So I'm hoping, like the Mayor, that we won't be here for too long, and I'm hoping to hopefully see if I can cut his hour and a half in half for him. So we'll see what we can do. So basically, as the CAO has already alluded to, what we tried to do is make this budget process a little more user-friendly, and specifically because we're going to be doing the multi-year, try and make it a little easier to read. And I know some of my spreadsheets seem to get wider as opposed to higher, so we've tried to adapt that process as well in doing this. So I'm just going to walk us through, like CAO has talked about the sort of first 1/3 of this document. So we really start out on pages 3 and 4 of the PDF, and we sort of describe our community. One of the key things here on page 4, I think, is the demographics, just the population. We recently just went through the BMA study, which is posted on our website now. So this is I think we started it in 2015, if I'm not mistaken. It's a study that's independently done that ranks us within not only the province, but also within the Southwest region, and sort of looks at different items of the financial health and demographics of the communities that participate in it. I think there's close to 250, if I'm not mistaken, of the 444. So just about half of the municipalities participate in it. So it's a good document. It's posted on our website and has all sorts of information in it as well. But one of the key things here is just the growth within this community. Between 2016 and 2021, we've seen a 14.4% increase in our population here. So some of the issues that we as a municipality are facing are simply because of that growth and needing to address the concerns of more residents within our municipality. And so that is a big driving factor, obviously, because municipalities are based on service levels. So what kind of services do we provide and to how many? So as those numbers increase, the population, so does the people that are using our services. So it's really a two-pronged piece with population. Because of a number of our services are user fee driven, obviously more users helps us collect more user fees. But also with that, there is components of our budget and our finances and our programming, which is based on taxation, and therefore those numbers climb maybe not at the same rate as the user fees though. So we move into page 5. Sorry.
Yep. Apologize, question or?
I just, sorry to interrupt there, Bill, the age distribution, based on numbers I've seen in the past, I would say that we would be a fairly young community compared to a lot of others that I've seen in the past. And so, the distribution in those age categories is almost the same from 0 to 9 as it is 70 plus. And there is a difference there, but we've got a lot of people in younger age categories, which is great. I think as a community, there's certainly a lot of strong future there. So I just wanted to make that observation. So.
No, and I just wondered, in fairness, if we have questions from Director Dakin, rather than saving to them, why don't we just jump in and ask the question, just do it through the chair. So fair with you, Director Dakin?
Perfect. Sounds good. Okay, so great observations there on the age distribution. And that maybe also leads to the fact of, the consumers of our programming when it comes to community services. We were talking about some of that even last night with our recreation programs, our summer camps and those kinds of things. Obviously with a relatively equally distributed age categories, we have equal opportunity for everyone and equal demand, I would say. Next we move into page 5, which basically just sort of provides the structure of the municipality. Obviously the council is a governing body. We have the 9 members, as you're well aware. They're here tonight, one digitally or virtually. And then we have our CAO who oversees all the operations, and then the different departments underneath those. And as we've stated, one of the things that we're going to be doing as we roll through these meetings is the different departments will be highlighted in each of those meetings and presenting their pieces of the budget. So there's a listing of those different departments and just sort of what's part of those departments. Then we move over to really page 10, and that's where we get into the municipal funding. So this is sort of gives a high overview of how we break down our funding based. So the numbers in here obviously are from the 2023 budget, and what we do, we'll do is as we go through, once we pass our budget, these numbers will be updated to the 2024. But just to provide this sort of funding breakdown, we looked at the 2023 budget. And you can see that basically 23% of the municipal revenue that we collect is taxation, and the balance of 77% is non-tax revenue. And I think that's something to highlight, that we do have a really strong balance between those two. Obviously, we'd like to see user fees and non-tax revenue increase and taxation decrease, but in a equal world, there's certain things that will just keep some of those numbers very similar. But those are two levers that we have, and as council you have, in order to generate revenue, that you can increase taxes or you can increase user fees and those kinds of things, which help offset the income of the municipality. Then we move over to page 11, and you'll see that we further break down the non-tax revenue sources, and you can see very clearly there that 59% of that is user fees. So going back to my previous comment, that is one of the levers that the council has to mitigate tax increases, is obviously user fees. Tied in with that are all these other sources. One of the big things is grants as well, loans, and those are things that we can partake of.
Councillor Wilsey?
On the user fees, I realize this is a draft document. A significant amount of the 59% is water and wastewater, isn't it?
Correct.
Can we break that out in the next version of this document?
I
We can see how much is the user fees and how much is water and wastewater?
Certainly.
Thank you.
Yep. Councillor Palmer?
In the non-tax funding breakdown too, I noticed that 3.8% is reserve funds and 17% is deferred revenue. Would that not be from tax dollars or part of it?
So, through the chair to Councillor Palmer, so deferred revenue may not always be tax dollars. Some of those deferred revenue would be grants. So it's, I'll give you a good example. Our skills trades program that we're working on with the high school, we received almost $2.5 million of the $5 million, so about half of the funding, but have only spent currently just probably just over $1 million. So that money is sitting in deferred revenue, so that is actually taxation. So there would be some of the deferred revenue would be taxation that's rolling over for capital projects, would say, would probably be the main source of the deferred revenue. But the deferred revenue is a mixed bag, so that's where we've had funds. Basically, the definition that we use to move something into deferred revenue is where we've received funds for a specific purpose and haven't used those funds for that purpose yet. So if it's a surplus within a operations, we'll say, that would get transferred into reserve funds, not necessarily deferred revenue. Hopefully that clarifies that. Yeah, so you can see some of the definitions down below, but I think we can understand just the different sources that we have, and obviously those are all things that the municipality and the council has at its use to increase revenue within the municipality. And finally, we look at, on page 12, we're looking at the taxation sources. With those taxation sources, we just basically split out the percentage in dollars that we collect from the taxation. So you can see that basically 76% of our tax dollars comes from the residential category or class of property within our municipality. One of the things that we'll be seeing at a future meeting, a finance meeting, is a breakdown of that the assessment by ward, and then we'll have the ability to at least provide 2023, and we can even break it down once we do the 2024 and further budgets as to how that revenue flows from those different wards. So that was a request of council, and that will be coming forward.
Director, I just have a question through me to you. In both of these, is there some kind of a KPI that said this is a good ratio or a good balance? So specifically looking at taxation, we all talk about wanting industrial taxes higher, but is there a formula or a guide that municipalities would use to show the health of a municipality, if I'm explaining that properly.
Yeah, so I think there are benchmarks out there, but part of it is different municipalities, obviously, like for instance, some of our neighboring communities or municipalities, like for instance, Middlesex Center has very low industrial, but high residential and commercial, those kinds of things. So it depends on the community, to be honest with you. So there are benchmarks, and to be honest with you, a really good use of that BMA study that is on our website shows exactly sort of those kinds of things. Probably the best bet is to read the executive summary, which is 5 pages, as opposed to, and you can read the whole document. The whole document's close to 600 pages, and it breaks down every.
Under the executive summary.
Yeah, that's what I read, and then if I find a question, I go into the deeper. But yeah, so I think there are benchmarks, but it's difficult because of the different municipalities, right? So it's kind of what's within, and I think one of the things that obviously this council I sense is interested in is trying to balance those things between wards, obviously, and within making sure that we're getting, part of being a lower tier though, the V factor it's called, so it's a multiplier that's used when you look at your assessment. So like for instance, a good example is the difference between the farm tax rate and the residential rate. So the farm tax rate is 25% of the residential rate. Those ratios are set by the county. So we really have we have input, but it's the county that would set those ratios. So obviously if we wanted to say we want to charge industrial at a higher rate, using a different multiplier, that has to be approved by county council.
Thank you. Yep, Councilor Cass.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Pipelines, that's $500,000. So I guess, how is that charged? I assume the company that owns the pipe pays it, but then we would tax the above the ground portion would be mostly farm, so it would be the pipeline and the farm would be, or whatever the land might be.
Through the chair to Councilor Kenneth, so that's exactly the way it works. The pipeline that goes through is charged at a specific rate, and then the earth, if you want to call it that, I guess it is the earth, above that is also charged. Yeah. Okay, moving on to page 13. So as I just alluded to, we are a lower tier municipality. So we collect 3 levels of taxation. One we collect for the County of Middlesex, which is now represents about 32% of any resident's tax bill, and they offer specific services, as we're well aware, for that 32% to our residents. Then we also collect the elementary and education tax and secondary tax on behalf of the province. So both of those taxes are collected by us and then remitted on the same quarterly basis to those municipalities, to those taxing agencies. And then we account for 55% of the total tax bill that the resident would receive. So it would be prudent to point out at this point that basically the discussions that we have in council.
Dr. Wilsey.
Sorry.
Oh, it could have, I was just wanted to verify that these were the 2023 numbers, because we don't know what county and education are for next year, right?
Right, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. I believe education is frozen, but the county, you're right, county's in the middle of their budget as well. So those numbers may change. They are based on the 2023. You are correct, thank you.
Councilor Hippel.
Thank you. Through yourself to Director Dakin, just the Middlesex County one, do we get charged less if we have the service already within our municipality? Do we get charged at all?
So I guess, I mean, fire would be something, I suppose, along that line. I'm not sure. I mean, are we paying for things that we have, but we're paying them as well, the county as well?
Through the chair to Councillor Hippel, so I'll say that's a bit of a loaded question, a good question, but a loaded question. There are certain services that the county provides to lower tier municipalities that we don't use. I'll give you an example, one which would be IT, for instance. So the county provides IT service to all of the other municipalities, but doesn't provide it to us. We part of that levy. So we have 2 county planners are part of our planning department. The county charges levy for that, and they are part of ours. Typically, they're services that the municipality, for the most part, they're services the municipality doesn't provide. Library service, EMS, those kinds of things, social services. Those are the pieces. And maybe the county representatives can provide further input on that one, but I think it's fair to say that there are certain departments within the county that we don't utilize as a lower tier that other lower tiers use, but for the most part.
Yep.
Thank you. So just as a follow-up, would that be something that we could, moving forward, not right at this very second, but moving forward, is that something that we can go to the county and say, since we don't use your services, we can lower? I know people ask that question. I actually know the answer to that because I've asked this question before, but others have not heard the answer. So I would love to for you to explain that.
Director Dakin.
Yeah. Through the chair to Councillor Hippel, I guess the best answer to that I am aware of is that for us to be excluded from those services then would shift that distribution. So it would be no different than one of our residents saying, well, I don't use streetlights, right? So why am I paying for streetlights? Well, you come into town, maybe, I don't know. So it's kind of difficult, I think, to separate those things out and say, well, we're paying for this, we're paying for that, or taxes for this and taxes for that. So to be honest, I think it's an all or nothing at all discussion as far as my
So just for clarification, thank you for the lead in. So we don't get, for lack of a better word, a tax break from the county because we have our own IT department, correct? Okay, thank you.
Through the chair to the chair, yes, no.
Okay, and they haven't turned Deputy Mayor and I loose on the budget yet. We're just like first degree counselors. When you get to 32 degree, then they'll let you be part of the budget committee. Did you have a question, Councillor Pammer?
No, I think I'll leave it, thank you.
Okay. Yep, Councillor Brennan.
Just a point, and I know the answer to this, but I'm just going to ask anyway. The 32% that Middlesex County and the 13% the elementary and secondary education, they get 100% of that money because we bear the expenses of collecting it and we bear the expenses of distributing it. But the 55%, I guess the question through the chair to the director is, that 55%, is that pretty much aspirational? Because we try to get as close to that as we can, but if people don't pay their taxes and we don't get revenue, the county and the elementary and secondary education, they get 100% of the taxes they're owed. But do we get 100% of the taxes we're owed, even though we do all the expense of collecting it all?
Through the chair to Councillor Brennan, so that's a great question. The answer is they get 100%. We obviously have a tax receivable account, and that tax receivable account is unpaid taxes, so we have to give our 17 and our 35, or 32, and then it's up to us to collect it in our receivable.
Councillor Derbyshire.
I just have a follow-up to that one. So then the interest and penalties that are occurred on those, do we split those, or that's all ours for having to deal with the hassle of this?
Through the chair of Councillor Derbyshire, the interest and penalty is ours, and we keep that, yes.
Thank you.
I will also point out if, like for instance, last night you did a reduction of 357, they call it, section 357, where you're reducing someone's taxes. So obviously, there's a tax reduction. So what we quote in our statements to, in our reports to you is a municipal portion, but obviously there's a rebate that is given as well to the landowner or resident on those other two as well. And that's separated out when we do those.
Yep. Councilor Cass.
This kind of hard to say, but like a single tier municipality, like what would theirs, they would only have that education chunk, like a London, like what percentage of that dollar would go to education, like, and I'm not even sure why I'm asking the question, but I guess it's, yeah, it might be a bigger coin as well, but, or a smaller coin, I don't know.
Through the chair to Councillor Kennis, I don't have an exact answer for that one because obviously their ratios would be different in the sense of it, but it would be fair to say, I think that it's sort of cut up the same way in essence, because a lot of those services that are provided in the 32% would be provided by the lower tier. So I'm not sure that the actual separation would be 13 in the quick calculation, 77. 87,
Yeah.
but it would be something fairly similar to that. Okay, those were great questions, thank you. So moving on to page 14, here we sort of just look at how do we sort of understand way property tax works. Obviously there is a third party called the Municipal Property Assessment Corporation that is tasked by the province of Ontario to do the assessment of properties. We take their assessment, better known as a current value assessment or CVA, and we apply, we take what we require as our budget number and divide it by the assessment value. It's been often said there's a fine line between those two numbers, and there is. So then we come up with what's called a tax rate or a mill rate. And so what we see here is just an idea from last year. In 2023, we had the mill rate of the 0 decimal and then those numbers. So if you had a $400,000 house, having, I guess just quick note, we're still using the 2016 assessment within the province because of COVID. Things were pushed off. So there is a reckoning day coming from MPAC where they will be doing reassessment, and it was supposed to happen in 2024. My understanding is now it's been pushed off again until 2025. So we're now 3 years in a row pushing that off. There will be some right sizing of things there when it comes to assessments. But within, so if we were to take a home assessed at $400,000 in the municipality, and we take our base tax rate, municipal rate, keeping in mind that there's three rates. There's the municipal rate, as we've already discussed, the county rate, and the education rate. So we're just looking at the municipal rate of that number. We multiply that by their value, and we come up with their property tax of $29.43 would be the property taxes that a $400,000 house would have paid in 2023.
Councilor Wilsey.
Just a question to follow up. I need to be using the microphone, sorry.
Yep.
I'm doing that. So just to follow up, when we get the new impact assessment and say that $400,000 house is now assessed at $800,000, if it was on last year's tax rate, what would happen is, my assumption, and I would just want you to confirm this, is that the mill rate would actually go down, but the amount of money paid by each house may increase a little bit based on it, but if your assessment doubles, your taxes aren't going to double. I just want to make sure that that's clear to anyone who's watching, just so that they don't get afraid about what's going to happen in a few years.
Through the chair to Councillor Wilsey, that is correct. Obviously, council has the decision to decide what that looks like from the ratio or that mill rate based on how, so, obviously the greater your budget, if the budget goes up at the same rate as your assessment, then that number would probably stay the same. But if your numerator, denominator, if the bottom number is increasing faster than the top number, then yes, you're correct, that rate would go down. So it is, you are correct, it's not something that if your property tax, if your house assessment goes up, then your property taxes are gonna double as well. That's not the way it works. And to be honest with you, if most people were to take a look at their property tax bill right now and look at what their house is assessed at and what they could sell it at, those are grossly two different numbers. So that's something to keep in mind. Even when I think the final assessment comes in, or the new assessment comes in, there will still be a discrepancy between what you're assessed at and what your selling rate is. So yeah, those are good points. Thank you for bringing that up.
Councillor Kennis?
So if they haven't updated assessment values, so a house that was built in 2023 would be assessed at a value that it assumed it would be in 2016, is that right? Or do they they assess it at what it's worth in 2023?
Through the chair to Councillor Kemps, that's a great question. And I will get an answer from that from MPAC. My understanding would be they would be assessing it based on, and up until probably 5 years ago, MPAC had a black box that all these calculations were done in. But if you're really bored some night or afternoon, you can go on the MPAC website, and actually they walk you through the evaluation process or evaluation. So with some tweaking, you can probably figure out what they're using and how they use it. But typically house sales are tied to sale values. So obviously with sale values rocketing over COVID, maybe what they're waiting for is the market to sort of level out before they do that. But anyways, yes.
I assume though they would have to look at a 2016 value, because otherwise people building a new house would have a much higher tax rate than so I assume that I would think that they would have to imagine that house was built in 2016 and give it that value, so.
Yep. Councillor Belkman, did you have a question, Councillor?
Not a question, thank you, but maybe a better way to answer Councillor Wilsey's question is that we as council deal in real dollars and not assessments. So when we say there's a 5% increase and you are paying $3,000 worth of taxes, you can probably expect to pay 5% on the $3,000 more, and the value of your assessment, assuming most residential assessments are going to increase roughly the same. That's when you see 5% in the newspaper, that means 5% of what you're paying off your property tax, not 5% of your assessment.
Okay, Director Dakin?
Thank you. So I will get an answer from MPAC on that and disclose it at a future meeting. So just to sort of put us in, moving over to page 15, now we sort of look at what we were just talking about. So let's say at the end of 24 discussion, or this budget discussion, we see a 5% rate increase. So what we would do is take that $400,000 house, create that new tax rate, which would be 5%. So what the homeowner would see would be an increase in the ballpark of $147,000, using the 23 numbers and assuming a 5% 24 rate. So you can sort of see how those apply.
Oh, Councillor, sorry. I'm reading as I go along too.
That's okay. Just curious, when you have the tax rate changes over time, we have 4 years where you had a 0 or less taxes actually went down. And I'm just wondering, just for context, I'm interested as to what would have been happening in the municipality for us to go that way.
Through the chair to Councillor Pamber, so good point. So basically what it was is exactly what Councillor Wilsey had described. So the tax levy increase was less than the assessment growth. So therefore we had a bigger number on the bottom and equally a less number on the top, so which produced a lower tax rate. So one of the things you'll see that obviously look at 2018, you know, it was a 4%. So there was that was sort of the last of the phase in of the 2016 numbers, or sorry, beginning of the phase in for the 2016 numbers. So that's what's happening there is that our tax, the assessment is increasing faster than the tax rate or the tax levy. So we talk, and it is confusing. So we talk about a tax levy. So that is the difference between what we collect and what we collected and what we're collecting. The tax rate then is the number that looks at that mill rate. So what does the mill rate go up? So they don't always increase at the same, because if your budget, if we budgeted less, for instance, or it only increased, so let's say a good example would be our budget increased by 2%, yet our assessment increased by 4 or 5%. Obviously, you're not going to see the full, the growth is going to pay for some of that increase in your tax levy increase.
Okay, Councillor Canis.
I think it's probably fair to say that in 2016, 17, and 18, people's tax bills still went up because of assessment value went up, and the tax rate was lowered to kind of keep it in line. So the chart, if you first look at the chart, might say that taxes went down, but they didn't go down. They just increased a different way, that's all. Yeah.
Yeah.
Rate decrease, but assessment went up.
Great. Thank you for that clarification. Okay, so moving on to page 16. So one of the things that we're looking at and pointing out is the difference between discretionary and non-discretionary costs. And as we move into the example of one of the departments, you'll see how this plays out. But discretionary costs are things that, as council, you have the ability to manipulate or increase, decrease. So those things would be things that are not necessarily legislated. So you need to understand as a municipality, there's legislative requirements that we have as a municipality and things that we need to do. And so within that, you have non-discretionary costs that's just the cost of impeding that or impacting that legislation. So as we move through, you'll see how we've sort of, in each department, allocated what would be discretionary costs and what would be non-discretionary costs. And those are based on the ability. So a good example is utility costs. Short of closing down the facility, you really can't control utility costs because the contracted service, the electrical company that you contract with to bring electricity to your facility, that's what they're charging, and that's what we have to pay. Obviously, it can become discretionary in the event if you close the facility. And so again, I think the key to keep in mind here is, as we started this discussion about municipalities, about levels of service. So we provide services to our residents, and obviously if we cut services, we can cut costs, both discretionary and non-discretionary. But the discretionary and non-discretionary costs are involved in both of those, so.
Councillor Wilson.
As a question, just relating back to Councillor Hippel's comment from earlier, through the chair to Director Dakin, the services that we're duplicating from the county, IT, planning, fire inspection, those type of things, are those counted in discretionary or non-discretionary? Because they're our choice to do that because we're duplicating services that are already provided. So which category are you putting those in the report?
Through the chair to Councillor Wilsey. So we are not, saying departments are discretionary or non-discretionary. What we're doing is within those departments, costs that are incurred in those departments. If council so chooses to say get rid of the IT department, then that is a cost or a service that they can get rid of that this municipality has. It provides for itself, and yes, we could get that product from the county, but the discretionary and non-discretionary are more aimed at within those departments. So what expenses within those departments are discretionary and non-discretionary? I think that's a whole different discussion in my mind, what departments are discretionary and non-discretionary, I think.
Councillor Wilsey.
So just as a follow-up then, so the services that are duplicated, they're included in the non-discretionary, then you haven't broken them out and included them in discretionary?
Correct.
Okay.
So through the chair to Councillor Wilsey, that's correct. So the IT department is just listed. The costs within those departments here are listed as are either discretionary or non-discretionary. I didn't get into the level of that at a service level, we'll say.
If you don't mind, I'm just going to interject something. I'm sure maybe the CAO would agree with me, but just a caution, when we start talking in open about services that may affect specific departments or staffing, I just caution that may be a discussion you want to have in closed session. So just to be cognizant of the fact that there are people involved, just early get this out there in our budget deliberations, any discussions about staffing or departments, let's have those in closed session.
Thank you. So kind of reached what I was going to outline. So here now we're on page 17 and 18. So we're looking at the building and planning department. So this is sort of the typical layout going forward. Obviously this is the operation budget, so there is no capital showing, and I think what we've discussed is that once we have the final budget approved, what we'll do is this will be updated and we'll include within the departments the capital, so it's kind of a one-stop shop. You can come in here under building and planning, see their operation piece, and then below we would have their capital piece, so that it makes it easier. But with close to 300, I think there was close to, not 300, probably about 80 projects on the capital budget. To list them all in here, this document would be huge. So I think once we get the approved list, then that approved list gets added here, and we would just continue to update that each year, keeping in mind of the multi-year budget idea that we're working on here. So just a couple things, and then we'll move forward here. So basically what you're going to see is as we get to the municipal departments, we'll be listing the department, so building and planning, in this case, what service areas of the budget are they categorized under. So we have building inspection, bylaw enforcement, and planning operations. And then what we did is looked at all the different legislations that come into play within those departments. So you'll see the list, and you're probably a better reader than I am, so you can see the list of those legislations that would come into case here. So then, just as we were talking a moment ago, the difference between the discretionary and non-discretionary. So typically, you will find that discretionary costs within the budget would constitute advertising, supplies, conferences, trainings, professional fees. So those things would be discretionary. the other items, basically because of the department being in operation. Wages obviously need people in that department, any contracts, and services, repairs and maintenance, those kinds of things would be then non-discretionary. One of the things that we've done is rolled up the detailed budget, although council has received detailed budgets, and those detailed budgets are available if people would so like to see them. Those are available as well, but within this document, we've rolled them up into these categories and made them consistent from department to department, so that there is some consistency when you look at these things. One of the things I will point out, obviously, is we've added the 2022 budget and actual, and 2023 budget and actual. Keep in mind the actual under 2023 is as of, I would say, mid to late December. So currently we haven't closed off the 2023 year end. I believe that closes off next week. So as we move through this process, we'll be updating the actuals within the 2023. So there may be some movement within those different categories, but just so council's aware, the actuals under 2023 would reflect expenses incurred up to the end of, I'll say, December, just before the break. So I would say mid-December includes those numbers. So there's some, there could be some movement within those numbers coming forward, just so council's aware. Last but not least, and I really appreciate your patience in listening, is just to sort of give you an overview of what's going forward from here. So obviously tonight, the idea was just to sort of give you an idea of the document, the ins and outs of that document, and just provide you with an oversight of that. Then on January the 18th, so this Thursday at 3 p.m., we'll start diving into different departments. On that afternoon, we'll be having finance and IT, HR, fire and police. We'll be coming forward. That schedule was sent out to the council, but just to keep it in the forefront. So directors will be here as well as myself. Then on January the 30th, we'll be enthralled with engineering and public works. Due to the large amount of work in capital specifically there, they're a standalone on their own on the 30th. And then February the 5th, we'll be looking at legislative services, legal and legislative services, community services, building and planning. And those directors will be here. And then we have 2 further meetings planned for February the 20th and February the 21st to fill in those gaps. And so we'll be, obviously the agendas for this week have already been set, but there'll be, if there's updates, we'll do our best as a finance department to get those updates in for each of those meetings. So we're looking at current numbers. If there's any questions other than the ones I've already entertained, I'm more than happy to answer them. So,
Councillor Wilsey.
To the chair, just a question for clarification. We're doing operations and capital on the same night for all departments. So on Thursday this week, we're doing capital and operations for 4 departments. Is that correct? Or are we doing operations and then capital later?
I can defer to Tricia.
So through your worship to council, yes, I think we also realized, and when we set the schedule, we realized, like, timing wise, we're going to have to, we chose some of the departments based on what we thought could fit in one day, realizing that if we can't and we only get so far, that we will have to reschedule on the following day. So yes, we'll be talking about operating and capital for each department as we go through, understanding that we might have to be a little fluid if we don't get to all of them, that we might have to push one back, and that's why we have those, we've set the dates for the 20th and the 21st, just to give ourselves a little bit of flexibility in the schedule. And then if I could also share, we also realize that as we go through the process, there might be an opportunity then to like, we'll be looking for, you know, some recommendations at each of these meetings as we go through that, you know, that let's say at the next meeting that the finance and IT budget, you know, the recommendation that it moves forward with the understanding that as we progress, there may be an opportunity to circle back for further discussion. But we're sort of looking for, yes, looks good, and then we'll move ahead. Yes, looks good, we'll move ahead with the understanding that there's always an opportunity as we move through each department. There might be a question that comes up that may be relevant to an earlier discussion. So it's not like we're being concrete at each meeting, but we want to sort of move forward by department, get some initial consensus from council, and then we'll continue to move forward.
Just to anticipate your question, we'll give it as much time as it needs to get it done, right, Councillor? Yeah. Any other questions? Councillor Canis?
I just want to commend everyone for putting together such a professional document. It's easy to follow and easy to understand, and it looks good. And yeah, I think we're certainly headed down the right path with something like this. So congratulations on that.
Councillor Brennan?
I appreciate the comments made by the CAO outlining the process that we're going to engage in for the next while. I think we almost could use a flow chart showing each of the meetings as a box. And then each of the boxes contains operating and capital for these departments. And that the outcome of each of these boxes is the idea that we're going to say, okay, we're going to approve this until such time as we circle back after having gone through each of the department budgets. In the past, there's been a hesitation by some councils to go ahead and do approvals for each department as we go along, with the idea being, I can't give approval to this one department's budget until I know the whole picture. The problem is that nothing really gets accomplished as you move through the process. But if we understand it's a flow chart and we have the ability after each of these meetings, after we say, okay, we approve of this tonight, that we have the idea that we can circle back to this, and there's a feedback loop, that once we have all of these initial meetings out of the way and we come up with the big picture, the big number, whatever it is, we will then be able to determine, is this acceptable, yes or no? And if it isn't, then we go back and we revisit some of the things that we have already initially approved. Approving it at each meeting doesn't mean it's approved for the final budget. It's approved in the process to try and get to a point where we have the overall view, and then we can determine whether or not that's the final picture. So I would ask if we could have some kind of, just a graphic flow chart so that we can see what the process is, what the feedback loops are, and then both ourselves and all members of the community understand what might appear to be a rather long chain of meetings. So I just think that I might benefit from that, and others might as well. So I would just make that recommendation. I don't need a motion or anything. It's just it's one piece of paper. Thank you.
No, if you were to make a motion, I would have seconded it. It would have probably got carried, so I think that's a great idea. Yeah. Need a direction, okay? Motion, seconder, is that a question or a second?
Well, it's another question, but we can deal with this one first.
Okay, you just have a direction to have a flow chart created. Yep, all in favor?
Yep.
Carried.
One pager.
One page. Councillor Canis.
I just wonder, in the same vein, if we're going through a lot of different things, I'm not sure it's fair to ask, but when we're getting lists of various projects in different areas or various expenses, some would be, we gotta do, like, they would have different priorities. Like, some would be nice to have, and some would be, we gotta do it. And I wonder if we can kind of get an indication of those when we go through as well, so that if we do have to circle back, we know, where we can look not have to go through the whole list again, I guess, is basically, yeah, the low-hanging fruit, so.
Is that part, CAO, is that part of, did you prioritize capital? Sorry?
Through the chair, yeah, maybe I'll let Director
Yeah,
Dakin speak to how we structured this.
Through the chair to Councillor Kent. So yes, there was a priority by most departments. They prioritized them. But again, we've in the past have sort of not brought like the 2s and 3s. So if you're thinking, you know, number 1 is we need to, and number 3 is would be nice to. Typically those 2s and 3s haven't been brought to council. But what we've done for the education of council and also staff is the 1s, 2s, and 3s are coming to council. So that's what makes this a bit of an onerous task at first, because you're seeing everything. And again, I know we've talked in the past about sort of what I'll call a business plan, for lack of a better term, for capital projects. The understanding would be to utilize staff time to write 20 business plans for projects that may or may not move forward, are going to be somewhat problematic. So what would happen is those would be had in discussion when we're going through capital. Here's sort of the funding opportunities, those kinds of things, so council could understand. And then as a final product, those business plans would be made for the ones that sort of see the light of day, projects that see the light of day.
Okay, so Councillor Kenneth asked a question. So when we see it, it will be prioritized, 1s, 2s, 3s. So we will see that. Okay. Does that answer your question, Councillor?
Yeah.
Councillor Wilsey.
I'm just wondering, just to take a step back before we do this, I'm just looking at the numbers from what's already been provided to us, and I'm wondering if going through the operations and approving the levels and spending all this time on that is getting ahead of ourselves. And the reason I'm going to say that is very simply looking at the numbers. Our 2023 taxation, which was capital, operations, everything, was 21.8 million. If I look at the spreadsheet provided by the Director of Finance, our proposed capital budget, excluding the Tri-Township Arena at almost $400,000 and Caradoc Housing is a blank where it was $750,000 last year, we're at 21.4 million. So we're $4 million or $400,000 short of last year's tax budget just in operations. And last year we had millions in capital, and we have a capital deficit for our asset management that we haven't talked about. If we add all of those things in, we're going to be looking at a 50% tax increase and have to work our way back from that. I don't know if the procedure we're looking at now is really what we, I just question spending all the time going through operations and looking at it, come back and say, well, we have to cut how much out of this, or we're going to increase taxes by this much. I just questioning the numbers and going through this. I don't know if I'm on board with this process.
Yeah, just Councillor Parks, fair thing. Do you have an alternative solution? Because I think the project just, you know, is there an alternative or a solution? I'm curious.
I think what we need to do is work backwards from what where we want our taxation to be and what our maximum rate is, and see what projects have to go forward. And then what we have to probably look at is where we can reduce in the operations budget to make the capital fit. There's things we have to do. We have a fire hall that we've already committed to building. We've got all sorts of things we've already done, so I think we should take a look at what our maximum amount is, take a look at what capital projects we have to do, and then see how we can make the operations budget fit the remainder.
Sorry, Councillor Pammer.
I agree. I was just going to comment that I thought you were going somewhere else with that. Sorry, Councillor Leslie, but I do think it's important as council is that we see everything, because we are the ones who are supposed to decide what's important, besides the obvious legislative and things we have to do that we are obligated to do. So although staff prioritize, we got to make sure that the decision-making stays at council in terms of what gets cut and what doesn't. So in order to do that, I guess what I'm saying is we kind of have to look at everything.
Yeah. Any other? Councillor Derbyshire. Okay, yep.
Sorry, that just leads into, I just have a question. I thought at the first budget meeting, we asked staff to bring us back what 5% looks like. Was I wrong? Okay, is this what we're seeing, what 5% looks like? Or are we actually now going to go through, like, are we changing the motion we originally made at the first meeting for them to find us 5, and we're now gonna find 5 on our own. I just want clarification on that. Whatever way you wanna go, I don't care. I just would like to know, well, where we're at now.
I had the 5% in my mind too, Counselor. Director Dakin?
So through the chair to council, what's sitting in front of you right now is an 8% increase, and that's holding the line at 3.9 million in capital. So if you won't spend any more over the 3.9 in capital taxation, then obviously that number is going up. Right now it's at 8% tax levy increase, which because we haven't moved that over to the tax rate, would probably, I don't want to guess, but I could figure out based on, if we were to say, all right, we're committed to the numbers on this page, and I can have that for you probably at the 30th meeting. If we were to commit to these numbers, here's what the rate increase would be.
Thanks. No, I wasn't, I just wanted clarification on what we were looking at, what that represented in the grand scheme of how close we were to our first motion.
Councillor Wilsey brings up a good point, Chair. As you see, the Caradoc Housing and Tri-Township Arena are at 0 right now, and that is simply because they have boards that approve their budgets, no different than, I think, police board, for instance. So I think those are things that what we're dealing with is a legacy system prior. They were included in there, but my recommendation would be that we look at municipal piece. We have councillors and councillors that are directors on both of those boards that can look at the financing of those boards. So, but that would be at the direction of council. But currently, we don't have a budget from the Tri-Township Arena, and I know we're working on one with Caradoc Housing, so, but those would be, there's no taxation involved in those, so there'd be no, in the Caradoc Housing one, obviously there's some taxation implications with Tri-Township Arena, but the Caradoc Housing clearly is to be self-sufficient, so I don't think there'd be a danger in excluding them from this budget and having them present their budget, but that's up to council.
Councillor Wilsey, didn't forget you.
Yeah, I was just gonna go back, thanks for clarifying on that, Director Dakin, but looking at it, we asked for 5%, it's at 8, with 3.9 of capital. We also have an asset management plan deficit of around $6 million from an earlier report we've seen this year. So if we're gonna do another year and not address our asset management deficit, and we've got a fire hall that we're building there, 10 million, and really some of that's going to debt, but there's a lot of roads and other things we have to do as well. I think we need to have a hard look on what we're actually gonna put before we go and say that operations can have this much increase and this much money put towards it. Or we're not gonna be looking at an 8%. By the time we put in all the things that we have to do, like, I don't wanna scare anybody. It could be a huge number. I have no idea how big that number could go if we do whatever we have to do that's legislated. And not ignore our asset management.
Yeah, and just, I'm gonna let you, my rhetorical thing, I guess we'll have to roll up our sleeves, and that's what we get paid to do, and we'll start it. So we'll go with Councillor Brennan and Councillor Kennis.
I just have a question about the 8% number in terms of precision. Is that an 8% increase in total tax revenue that you're talking about, or an 8% increase in the tax bill that a person would receive in the mail?
Through the chair to Councillor Brennan, that's an increase in the tax revenue. So the tax rate has not been calculated yet.
So an 8% increase in tax revenue does not necessarily represent an 8% increase in someone's tax bill, because assessment and other things can change. So it could very well be that we have an 8% increase in tax revenue, but that could lead to a lower, significantly lower number in terms of a tax increase in someone's tax bill. Is that correct?
The two numbers typically, through the chair to Councillor Brennan, the two rates the two percentages, the two amounts do not equate to the same thing. So just because you have an 8% levy does not mean you're gonna have an 8% rate increase, and that's, so what we need to do is, we need to get the numbers from MPAC, which we just received, put them into our tax schedule, calculate what an 8% levy increase looks like as a rate increase.
Councilor.
And can I ask, when would we be able to have that number realistically in terms of the information you're receiving?
As I said, I think through the chair to Councilor Brennan, I think that number could be easily provided at the 30th, January the 30th meeting.
Okay. Councilor Kennis?
Yeah, I just, you know, I think we have to go through the process. And
Yeah.
as you said, we have to make cuts. And as Councilor Palmer said, we need to go through all the lists because we need to understand what's there. And obviously, we can't do everything. And I think we're all pretty set on that 5% or less. And that's what we'll aim for. But we've got to take a look at everything.
Okay, anything
Yeah.
else? Go ahead, Councilor.
Sorry,
Derbyshire.
all I was making sure is what we're looking at, what does that somewhat represent? You know, like if he said, well, that's, you know, a 9% tax increase. Well, all right, we got a lot of work to do, or we send it back and say, we told you 5. That's all I was kind of getting at. I am glad to hear, though, we will know more of what we have to spend, because that really is how we should function, is knowing what we have to spend before we just say, let's go shopping. That's, and I call it shopping, it's not shopping, we're doing the
No,
business.
it's shopping.
Yeah,
Okay.
but you know what I mean, I am glad to hear that, thank you.
Anything else? I think then 8:07, any other questions? Do you want to make final comments or anything, CAO?
If I could just say thank you, this was a great discussion tonight, lots of great questions from council, and we're looking forward to Thursday night to get into things, so thank you.
So with that, we'll see everyone Thursday night, same time? 3 o'clock. 3 o'clock? Okay.
3 o'clock, that's I'm checking right now.
Okay, how about this?
It's 3
Motion-
PM on Thursday.
A motion to adjourn.
Okay.
Deputy Mayor, second by Councilor Kennis. Sorry, I apologize, Greg.
Don't we have a meeting tomorrow?
Tomorrow, we have a strategic.
Strategic plan, 5
Oh,
o'clock.
we're talking about this, yes.
Strategic plan at 5.
Strategic plan at 5. What day is it? Where am I?
Yeah.
Here. Motion to adjourn. Carried.